For Game 9, Garry Kasparov had the white pieces again. He had been neutralized with the Berlin defense earlier in the game, but rather than back down from playing e4, he marches forward and opens Game 9 with the Roy Lopez opening, e4. Just like in the previous game, the two players developed their pieces to control the center, and after more pieces vie for the center and the queens get traded off, the game reaches this position. To continue crafting his defense, Kramnik plays h6, a move that is very important to stop the bishop from getting in to harass the uncastled king. In response, Garry plays rook to d1 checking the king, and unlike the other games we have seen before, Kramnik responds with king to e8. Garry Kasparov plays h3, which on one hand takes control of the g4 square, but on another level prepares the foundation for g4 to kick the knight away. We get a5, bishop f4, bishop e6, and as expected, g4, kicking the knight away. We get knight to d4 by Garry attacking the bishop, and Kramnik responds with a similar move, knight to d5, counter-attacking the bishop as well. And believe you me, just like in the previous games, nothing spectacular happened in this game as well. Kramnik came prepared for Garry Kasparov's wizardry as both players shuffled and maneuvered their pieces till they agreed to a draw on move 58 or so. The game was a draw. Kramnik has proven more than twice that the Berlin defense was the best opening to use to neutralize an attacking player like Garry Kasparov when he's playing black. This tactic was so effective in getting them in an unusual state of mind going into game 10 where he would be playing with the black pieces. He had won one and he drew the remaining. For Kramnik, a win would be a huge step forward in his quest to becoming a champion. Garry needed to win at all costs, even though it was just game 10, because the farther he went without a win, the more his confidence would keep falling like a house of cards. And so, as they sat across the board again, the question hung in the air like a held breath. Who would seize destiny when the first move was played? For game 10, Kramnik took another turn. He began with d4, knight f6, c4, and then the Nimzo Indian defense appears on the board with bishop to b4. Kramnik continues the game with e3, castles, bishop d3, and Garry, after castling, rams into the center with d5. Kramnik continues developing. We get c5 on the board, and in response, Kramnik castles, leaving tension in the center. At this stage in the game, pawns started flying out of the board with c takes on d4 and d takes on c4. The bishop recaptures, which lines it perfectly towards the king. Kasparov continues the game with b6, preparing to fianchetto the bishop, and in response, Kramnik develops his dark squared bishop, pinning the knight to the queen. We get bishop to b7, rook to e1, knight b to d7, rook to c1, and we reach this critical point where Garry Kasparov plays rook to c8. This move is not just another move, it attacks the bishop on c4. Kramnik has options here. He could slide the bishop back to evade the attack, but he soon realizes that would be a sign of fear. So rather than that, he chooses queen to b3, protecting the bishop and also attacking black, dark squared bishop on b4. But is this move good? Well, let's see what Garry Kasparov has for us. Garry has some options here. He could take the knight, but the drawback of this would be he would be giving up a bishop for a knight. The other option is to keep the bishop by retreating, which also has its drawback of retreating or underdeveloping a piece that was once developed. And more importantly, the move has a huge downside. But can you spot it? In fact, it is a blunder. But would Kramnik spot it? Well, let's go over it. The first thing you should notice in this position is that the only piece protecting the bishop is the queen. Now, the problem with that formation is that a piece with a higher value should not be the one protecting one with a lower value. It should be the other way around. If we are able to double the attack on this bishop, it would be fantastic. And that is by the side. The other thing that comes to mind is the battery of the queen and the bishop. It is not just another battery, but one that is facing the king, which means it is really volatile. If all things were fair and equal, Black would love to sack the bishop like this so they can subsequently check the king, and take the black bishop, which I said earlier was not in the best position because it is only protected by a piece with a higher value than it. The bishop cannot be taken at this point because black can simply block the check with the rook, and white will not be able to continue the attack with the knight because it will simply be captured. That is why in this position, Kramnik continues the game by giving up his bishop for the knight, then sacrifice his bishop temporarily to win it back. Notice that in this position, Garry cannot block with the rook because this will simply be attacked by the knight on the next move. So Garry Kasparov retaliated by destroying Kramnik's pawn structure before picking up the pawn in the center of the board. We get knight to b5 by Kramnik. Although the move leaves this pawn undefended, it is headed for something bigger, the king's head. The queen captures, a very questionable move. Garry was too desperate to equate material. He forgot the fire on the mountain will soon reach his home. But how? Kramnik first exchanged the rooks, then knight to d6 attacking the rook and the king indirectly. The rook moves out of the way, then we get knight to f7 check. The king moves to g8, then Kramnik sets up a discovered check on f6. Sensing the danger, Garry brings his rook to f8. If you were Kramnik, how would you continue? Before I state the answer, smothered mate is not possible because after you sacrifice the king, black would take with the knight and not the queen, and you lose the game. So here, Kramnik plays knight to d8. Of course, Garry can't take because he has to address the check. So the king moves to h8, and after that, the queen positions itself on e7, attacking the rook, and it was at this moment Garry Kasparov made a move he had never made before. It was a shock, and no one in the room expected it. That move was resignation. With game 10 behind them, the match moved steadily towards its conclusion, and nothing Garry Kasparov tried was enough to break Kramnik's grip. Kramnik never lost a single game in the entire match. He held every remaining position, neutralized every idea, and protected the lead he had built. When the final game was completed, the scoreboard was unmistakable. Vladimir Kramnik won the 2000 World Chess Championship match 8.5 to 6.5. He became the world champion, ending Garry Kasparov's reign after 15 good years. Kasparov did not win a single game in the match. The Berlin defense Kramnik prepared turned into the wall Kasparov could not break, and a new era had begun. But the story did not end with a new champion. Kramnik's victory pushed the chess world into something unprecedented, a divided title. Vladimir Kramnik was the classical world champion, the line that came from Garry Kasparov, and FIDE had its own world champion from a separate knockout system. So instead of one official king of chess, the sport now had two. One title, two holders, and no agreement on who was the real champion. This led to the biggest question of the era, questions that would drive the next part of the story. How did the chess world get reunited? Who brought the crown back under one undisputed champion? And what battles had to be fought to make that happen? Those answers would come in the next part of this video. So please hit that subscribe button and get us to 2K so you wouldn't miss it. Thank you very much for watching to this point. If you have missed the previous episodes, kindly click them on your screen so you can enjoy. Bye!